Yes.
And we can be.
Learn to speak up.
Or I make up for her.
He does.
First of all, we definitely want to just thank everybody for coming out. We never know, who God's going to put in our path, but we always know that it's special and it's His plan, and we want to share this story because it's almost like just unbelievable. I'm an old farm boy from Ohio. I grew up in northern Ohio, baling hay, picking sweet corn. That's where my life started. And so when something like I went through something like this, and then God's blessings kept growing, and as we tell the story, you'll know. But it's just something that we love to share because it's just so incredible, so unbelievable. So.
Yeah, and you start.
I get to start?
You do.
Okay, so, and the reason why is because, tell a little bit about the timeline. Just like, okay.
You always start the story.
The story is, and I'll tell you what happened to me, but the story is, this is what happened to me, and there was things going on with Hannah at the same time. And that's why it's just so unbelievable. And then God put us in each other's path, and so then we could continue, carrying this journey and doing what we do, and two's better than one, right? It's a 2-for-1 deal. So I was born in Fostoria, Ohio, by Bowling Green, below Toledo. I actually did bale hay and pick sweet corn, and worked on a pig farm. I had to ride my bike out there. You tell your kids that these days, and they laugh that we walked 10 miles, each way in the snow uphill. But that's really, I really did ride a bike to the farm, work, and then ride home. I actually went to Ohio State in '83, lived in Columbus for about 10 years, and then when I started in a business, a sales rep for a nutrition company, they sent me to Arizona and Nevada area and parts of California, and as I got out there, I couldn't believe the mountains and the beauty. I'm a nature nut, and so I'm hiking, and I get a mountain bike, and so when I go out there to work, I also got to adventure, and I just fell in love with it. So after 4 or 5 trips out there, I said to myself, why are you going back to the rain and the snow and the gray skies in Ohio? And so I relocated to Phoenix, Arizona 26 years ago. So the whole story of my life and raising kids out there and all this stuff happened. But we'll fast forward a little bit up to 2015. So in 2015, I had a landscaping business. I designed landscaping and swimming pools all over the valley. I thought I died and went to heaven. I'm outside in people's front and backyards in Phoenix, Arizona, 365 days a year. So to me, it was just unbelievable. But the problem was, I started getting tired. I started having some back pains. And I had something that I call male mentality, where you say, oh, I'll be okay tomorrow. But I wasn't okay tomorrow. It got worse and worse and worse. And so on a Friday night, I actually took my boys downtown Gilbert, Arizona, was the little town we lived in, downtown Gilbert to the food trucks for dinner, and then back home and popped in a movie, and I couldn't get comfortable on the couch, on the floor, with pillows, blankets, everything. I couldn't get comfortable. And I told the boys, they were in high school, I said, when you go to bed, I'm going over to the hospital just to see if they can figure out what's going on with me. So when I went to the hospital, they start running scans and tests, and the first thing that came back is just a basic x-ray, because it's fast, they can get it back. And then the emergency room doctor pops her head in my room and she says, we got the x-ray back. You got 2 fractured vertebrae in your back. I'm like, what do you mean I got 2? Well, I haven't fallen. I don't remember anything that would have fractured my back. And I'm trying to think, I'm like, who would walk around with a broken back, right? So what happens at 5 in the morning, she comes in, she shuts the door, she pulls the chair up next to me, she looks at me, and she says, I got bad news. Unfortunately, everything you're going through is cancer related. So then my head starts spinning, and I'm thinking, what kind of cancer and how bad? And she said, there's specialists coming in tomorrow to do the biopsies. You know her?
Yeah, come on it.
Yes. How are you doing? Good to see you. So they bring in specialists to do biopsies into the bone marrow and lymph nodes and stuff. Then they send me home. 3 days go by, and the hospital calls and says, come back, we got your test results. So I go back, shut the door. The doctor comes in, shuts the door. He's the guy that did all the biopsies and all the specialist stuff. And he says, I can't even believe you just walked in here. He says, I've never seen anything like this before. He says, unfortunately, you have cancer in 90% of the bones in your body. So we do this for, quite a few people, but this is fun because I'm going to show you some stuff on my own phone, okay? And this is pretty crazy stuff, and I'll show you. I should have set this up before we. So when they do a scan, I came back with a front and back scan of the bones in my body, and 90%. The black is supposed to be white, and the black is all cancer. So that's my actual scans I got back from the doctors at that time. Okay? And that just shows where I was at. And this is important because of the journey that I went on. So you've got cancer, 90% of your bones in your body. It's so bad, we don't even know where it originated. We don't know when it started. We don't know what kind of cancer to tell you that you have. All we know is there's nothing we can do about it. You're at stage 4. You might make it the next 3 months. Just go home and be with your family. So as you can imagine, this is just not I just turned 50 years old. 2 young boys. I was raising by myself, and I could not believe. I drove home, and I always say that I wasn't really crying, but I had these huge tears running down my face. I couldn't believe the news that I just got, and I had to get home and sit my boys on the couch and tell them. They knew it was cancer because of what happened over the last 3 days. They didn't know that it was this stage 4, 3 months to live kind of news. And so something I want to add also is that night I got a knock on my door. 2 hospice nurses show up at my house. So I'm sitting there, and there's 2 hospice nurses sitting on my living room couch, and they're writing prescriptions for pain meds, and they wrote a prescription for a hospital bed to sit downstairs so I didn't have to climb the flight of stairs, and they had tears in their eyes, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm going through this, right? So what happens is me and my boys start chatting that night, and I go, if I only have 3 months to live, let's just go back to Ohio and spend that time with my mom and my dad and my family and the people that I love. And so we said, okay. And so we started thinking, we're not going to move our stuff across the country if I'm melting away. And I started thinking, what did all my beautiful brown leather furniture and flat screen TVs and all the stuff that I worked my tail off my entire life, what did that become when I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Material stuff. And as my friends called and said, I want to come by and talk to you a little bit and chat a little bit before you go. And it was a lot of tears and it was a lot of hugs. But I told them before they came, bring a truck or bring a U-Haul and take whatever you want. And they said, what are you talking about? And I says, I'm not moving my stuff across the country if I'm going to melt away. And I said, if you don't take it, it's going to be on the curb at the end of the day, and anybody that wants it can have it. And I watched my stuff that week as I hugged my friends and big tears rolled, and I watched my stuff all drive away. Down to a few suitcases. On a Saturday night, me and my boys stayed at the Hilton at Tapatio Cliffs, which is right in the middle of Phoenix, because the next day we're just going to jump on an airplane, and the 3 of us come back to Columbus, Ohio, where my family's at. So we stay there the night. The next morning, I actually get up to go down the hall, and something popped. I heard a pop, and I hit the floor, and I couldn't move. And I've been through a lot of crazy stuff in my days, cuts and bruises and things with landscaping and farming and stuff. And I never felt pain like this before in my life. And if I even tried to breathe where your diaphragm's affected, I couldn't even move. If I tried to breathe, it felt like somebody was stacking me in the back with a knife and running it up to my head. The fire department show up. They actually get me on a gurney, and every move and every bump, it was just excruciating. And they got me onto an ambulance, and it gets me over to the nearest hospital, which is called John C. Lincoln Hospital. It's in Phoenix, Arizona. It's an older hospital. I remember it like it was yesterday. Every light in the room, every doctor's name, every nurse's name. and they start running their own tests. And so they come back to my room that next day. I was there for a day after the tests and stuff were ran, and they had 2 spinal surgeons, and the spinal surgeons are checking my legs to see if I was numb, because what happened when it popped was called a compression fracture, and what I call is a broken back. My back got so soft and damaged from the cancer, it couldn't hold me up no more. So the spinal surgeons were checking my legs to make sure I wasn't paralyzed because of the way it broke. And they had 2 spinal surgeons, a cancer doctor, a hospital doctor, and a hospital administrator became my little medical team. And they were looking at all the scans and trying to determine what the plan was. So they come in my room and they say, okay, first of all, we're going to tell you, it was prostate cancer. It started in your prostate, and who knows how long you let it go. A year, 2 years, 3 years. But cancer goes to where it's fed, and it got in your bone marrow and your lymph nodes, and it went all over your body. It's everywhere now. And we have a plan, and we want to fight it. And I said, what do you mean you have a plan, you want to fight it? I just had hospice nurses sitting on my couch. They're planning on me checking out, right? And I said, what's the plan? And they said, 2 surgeries tomorrow and chemo the next day. Hey, a fight's a fight, right? Let's go. So the next day they wheel me down to down into the surgery area, and they're getting me ready for my surgery. And there's a bunch of beds and a bunch of curtains, and they wheel me in, and I remember everything. They put a device, when you're talking about cancer, they put a device in your chest called a port, and it takes the chemo in. That's what they were getting me ready for. I remember it all the way up to them shaving the chest and everything until they put the anesthesia in there and knocked me out, okay? I wake up 2.5 hours later in the recovery room. So I wake up and the nurses bring me water and ask how I'm doing. And then after I'm fully awake, the 2 docs came in one by one and explained to me that each of my surgeries went perfectly, right? And so I said, okay, here we go. We're in this fight. And as I'm laying there, watching everything going on around me, waiting to go upstairs and see my family, the room turns weird cold for no reason. And I do one of these numbers, and I look down because I'm thinking somebody opened the door at the end of the room and let the cold air in, and that's how it just got cold that fast. But the door was shut. And then I turned this way, and as I turned back to my left, I jumped, and I had a vision of Jesus standing right here next to me. And all I see is a brown robe, white scarf, his beard and his face. And then I see his right leg just kind of half a step towards me, and he reached like this and touched my shoulder, and he's gone. And I think I heard, and I stopped telling this story because it's like it was in my mind, I got you. 3-4 seconds, okay? I'm laying there flipping out. I'm laying there thinking, okay, was that a doctor? Was it a nurse? Was it a janitor? What just happened to me? So they wheel me upstairs to my room, and I'm telling my kids and my family what's going on. They're all in tears. They're like, what do you mean? I said, yeah, he was standing right here next to me and touched me on the shoulder. So we didn't know what it meant, right? The next day, from 2 surgeries, from a broken back, from cancer in 90% of the bones in my body, the pain stops. They can't. The nurses are like, here's the button. As soon as it starts, and it will, hit it and we'll bring you something. From that day to right now, I never touched another pain med. I had pain meds piling up on my kitchen counter and took 2 grocery bags to the fire department in my neighborhood to dispose of them. I didn't need them. I didn't use them. And so what happens is I'm set up. They went from 10 days at John C. Lincoln Hospital to 5 weeks at the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm in a back brace. I can't even, tie my own shoes or shower or anything. And the Mayo Clinic was an interesting place for me. If you Google the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona, it's in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing around it. They're starting to build now, but it's just desert, right? And so a couple things happened there. I started chemo, and I had good days and bad days. Everybody's affected differently by chemotherapy, and chemo kicked my tail. I sat up to get out of bed, and I would lay back down and sleep for 6 hours, and it took 3 or 4 days for me to get back to where I could actually go and get breakfast and do things. But on my good days, I sat up and slipped into my shoes, and I went out the door into the desert. And I'm a hiker, so that was my happy place. That's where I wanted to be. that was my place of nature. And I can see the McDowell Mountain Range right here, which I always thought was gorgeous. And being an old farm boy, I still wake up at 4:35 in the morning. So I'm out a few feet, and some days I walk a little bit further into the desert, watching the sun come up, because I wanted to do a couple things. I wanted to see if my arms could move, because I broke my back. So I wanted to kind of see like what I could do and what I couldn't do. And the other thing I wanted to do was I started having little chats with God. I just got out there the first day and I said, what gives? You know, I'm completely lost here. I said, I've been completely taken out of society. I don't have my kids, my job, my health. I have nothing. It's me and you. What gives? And just as clear as us chatting right now, I hear a voice in my head, and he says, you wasted a lot of time in your life. He says, you're going to get it back little by little. And as you do, I want you to start focusing on what you're truly passionate about. And I'm in the desert by myself going, is this really happening? Am I having a conversation with God, And so what happens is 5 weeks at Mayo Clinic, back to Gilbert, Arizona, which threw everybody off, because usually when someone says he's stage 4, he just broke his back, he's usually not going back home, and let alone go home and take his kids to football practice and cook dinner for them, right? And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a family with my boys. So I got back to Gilbert, Arizona, and then between chemo sessions, when I was feeling good, same thing. I got in the complex's swimming pool and just started moving around. And then I go, I think I can swim to the other end. And over the next 2 weeks, got up to where I was swimming 20 laps a day. I would go to the park and walk if you go around the top of the park 1 mile, that's 1 mile. But I'm looking at the hill going, I think I could maybe run to the top of the hill and walk back to the bottom. And going through cancer and losing 40 pounds, I lost all my muscle. My body melted off of me. So I ran to the top and I walked to the bottom maybe 2 times the first day, maybe by the end of the week, maybe 6 or 8 times. But by 2 weeks, I was up to actually doing that 12 to 14 times a day. Just push myself. I don't know why at the time. I didn't know why. I just knew that I didn't know my limitations unless I tried things. How would I know what I can do and can't do? So that's what I did, was I pushed myself in a lot of ways. Went through 6 months of chemo because it was the program the doctors put me on. Every time you go in, it's a blood test. Then you go in and get your 3 hours of drip into your port. And then you go back down and wait for them to call your name. And they call your name, and it's your doctor would see you and tell you what's going on with your blood test compared to last week and the week before. So 3 months into my 6 months of chemo, I do my routine, blood test, chemo, sitting in the waiting room, they call my name. I go in, and my doctor's name is Dr. Ahmad. She's about 4'10" and just a fire plug. We're gonna fight cancer, we're gonna do this. So I just loved her to death. And I walk in, and she's just got this huge smile on her face. And I go, good, how you doing? Good to see you. What's going on? She goes, I have never seen anything like this before in my life. She says, I do not have an explanation of what's going on here. She says, but I do want to tell you, your journey is not of medicine, it's miraculous. Your blood test looks like a normal, healthy guy. 3 months after the diagnosis. So I was already just head spinning, and I was already knowing this is miraculous. There's no doubt about this journey that I'm on right now. So another really cool thing happened, and I got to tell you about it, and I'll have Hannah find the picture. So check this out. So I go through 6 months of chemo. In the last 2 months, I didn't want to go because I was feeling pretty good. And I pull in the parking lot, and I'm crying like a baby. I called my mom and dad in Ohio, and I said, I'm going in for 3 hours of chemo. We're praying for you, son. And I'd sit there crying, and I was like, I'm getting better, and everybody's so sick in there. I don't want to go in there. And I made myself go in and get 3 hours of drip, knowing when I got home it was going to be 3 or 4 days of sleeping it off. So I basically finished the 6 months of chemo, and they do all the scans. And they can't find any trace of cancer anywhere in my body. So that right there was just unbelievable. But something happened. So my doctor and I, we kind of get into it a little bit, and I told her, I'm swimming 20 laps in the pool every day. And she says, be so careful. You have metastasized bone. You still have damaged bone all over your body. And that stuff's with you for the rest of your life. She said, I had a patient that was very ICU, and he went down to pick up a bag of groceries, and when he did it, he suffered 3 fractures in his back, and he had to go to a nursing home, and he couldn't take care of his family ever again. And she says, that's how serious this is. She says, be very careful everything you do. So what happens is, I say, okay, well, I put some, I oiled up the chain on my mountain bike. And my doctor's like, no, don't tell me that. And I told her, I said, me and my boys, we do mud runs. And she's like, no, your life has changed. She said, you got one more test coming up. She says, you got to get a bone scan. It's called a nuclear bone scan, where they go in and they scan your bones, and they can tell you what's going on with your bones, and also the density to see what you can do and what you can't do. So what happens is, I go into this test, I go through the scan, I'm sitting in the room with a bone cancer specialist and her assistant, and as I'm sitting there, they're looking at the pictures on the screen of my bones. And they're flipping through them, and I'm sitting there, and I'm kind of watching them talking back and forth, and pretty soon the doc turns to me, she says, can you see the screen? And I'm looking, I go, yeah, but I mean, I'm not a doctor, I don't know what this is, it looks like bones, right? She goes, come up here closer. So I scoot my chair up right behind them, and they start zooming in on the really bad places. My lower spine, my pelvis was in real bad shape too. They zoom in on these places, and she looks at me, she says, if I didn't know you and I hadn't seen your previous scans, I would think you're lying to us. Your bones are perfectly clean.
Yeah, so that's just one little part of it.
I screenshot one off of my computer, because if you look at it, it's just it's just bones. And this was supposed to be all this damage, and Hannah, being an operating room nurse, knows what metastasis and the damage from cancer can do. And even if you make it through that journey, the scar tissue and the things that stay with you, and they were all gone. And I am not kidding you. I walked to the parking lot of that place, and I basically said to myself, Lazarus, get up and walk. I said, you were the dead guy, and God's given you a second chance. Get up and walk. And so I start not only helping cancer people, because I knew that's where God wanted me to be, but also cancer people started calling me. My phone would ring. Your cousin in Ohio gave me your phone number. Somebody was diagnosed and you survived stage 4 cancer. What did you do? And I'm like, and I tell them my story. And then I want to tell them a few things that I did that helped me get through it, the praying and the juicing and the exercise. So I started sharing what I did, and something really, really neat happened. And as I'm telling them my story and what's going on, and maybe about juicing or something I did, I would hear them say, hey Chuck, can you hold on a minute? Hey honey, get a pen. Okay, what did you juice? It wasn't what they said, but it was how they said it. It was, what did you juice? Like, we're ready to fight. I could hear it in their voice. I can hear it, and it just, everything changed in 20, 30, 40 minutes of conversation. And what I realized was this story, this crazy story, was giving people hope. It was giving people hope. So I start helping cancer people everywhere I can. I still have a landscaping business in Phoenix. I make a little card that says Cancer Coach on it that I'm giving out. I tell them, I didn't go to school for this. I call it God school. I went through God school. He's put me through this, and he's wrote this story. I just help as many people as I can. So what happens is, I get a message from my cousin Heather, who, this is my mom's family from Northern Ohio, and she moved to Portland and then ended up back in Phoenix. And so I get a message from her, and it says, I have a friend that was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, and is a single mom, like you're a single dad, is writing a book, and I know you wrote your book and it was published, and I think you guys should meet, right? My cousin introduces me to Miss Hannah.
And that's where I come in. So this is kind of the fun, like how God puts us together. How many parts of this do we want to tell? Can you guys hear me okay? So the very fact that I can speak, and I know Ivy can attest to this, is a miracle, because last summer I actually was in a situation where one of my vocal cords was completely paralyzed, and I was unable to talk for more than 10 minutes. I was unable to sing, and now I'm singing, and talking. And it's just such a good testament of what a healer God we have. Right here is ours too.
You got it?
So, I love that he has restored my voice, first of all. So this is a really fun part of our story, is how God brought us together. So I actually was out here, and you might remember if I was in church. I came to visit my parents in July of 2019. I actually spent an entire week here. Came to church probably twice. And that was the season, that month, that I finished writing my book, and it had been something God had been calling me to, and I just needed to finish it. So it was easier for me to write when I wasn't home. So I came home to Phoenix in August of 2019, and I was spending, because I was single at the time, trying to spend a lot of time in service at church, because I had time to do it. And one of the things I loved to do was go and help with the children's ministry. And so his cousin Heather was the head of our children's ministry. Instead of dealing with the snot-nosed kids, because at the time I had a pretty low immune system from the medication I was on, I was like, I can do the behind-the-scenes stuff. Like, let me help pull the crafts and make the crafts and the lessons and stuff. So I got to know Heather really well. She became one of my really good friends. And so I'm sitting here talking to her, like, I finished writing my book, and I've really been praying, like, pray with me about this, how to publish my book. And she just all of a sudden looks at me, and she's like, I have no idea why I've never told you about my cousin Chuck. She's like, he just self-published a book last month. He survived end-stage cancer and has a miracle story. You guys should meet. And at that moment, she was thinking that was either like the dumbest idea she had come up with to introduce the two of us, or the very best. We all know how that ended. So she's like, I don't have his phone number, but just look him up on Facebook. He's on Facebook. So I go home, I look up Chuck Keels on Facebook, and I try to add him as a friend. And he's got 5,000 friends, so I'm like, okay, I gotta send him a message. I'll just go on Messenger, but you know, if you're on Facebook and you send somebody that's not your friend a message, it goes to the other folder.
Let me explain it. Let me explain what that means. So just like everybody else, I had a Facebook page. And just like everybody else, it's my buddies in Ohio and a few guys from LA and some people I ran around with as I moved across the country and stuff. And so I might have had 600, 700, 800 friends, right? Well, after my cancer journey, people started pouring in. You know, they wanted to hear the story, and they started friending me and stuff. And so I started friending people, and I didn't know that on Facebook, a regular individual page, if it gets to 5,000, it stops. It closes you down. That's all you can add. Not only that, but the people can still contact you, but when they send you a message, it goes into some weird file over here. And why I call that the weird file is because anybody in the world can send you a message through this file. And you get all the scammers and jammers and all the crazy stuff, you know? So once a month, what I would do is I would go in and I would just delete it and just clean it out and make sure nothing was in there. And this was one of those months at the end of the month where I was going through and just deleting stuff, and I stopped and I find this message.
So I sent it August 28, 2019. I love the timeline of this. I think this is just like such a cool thing because it's God, the details God has, right? So I send it. I stalked him a little while on Facebook and finally sort of got the idea. I'm gonna actually message him. Hi, my name is Hannah. I'm your cousin Heather's friend. I'm a single mom of 4 boys. I have metastatic breast cancer. I just finished writing my book and I'm just trying to figure out how to publish it. You know, do you have any tips? And as I hit send, I specifically recall praying over it and just praying like, God, if you want him to find this, if ever, I'm going to leave it in your hands, because I'm like, this guy's 8 years older than me. I have no idea where he is, if he's tech savvy, if he's going to find that other folder. So thankfully, 4 weeks later, he finds it.
Yeah, 4 weeks later was when I was sitting there deleting messages, and I see this message and it says, I know your cousin Heather. I see the word cancer. I see I'm writing a book, and I'm kind of mad at myself. And I was like, how did I miss this? If somebody mentions cancer around me, I'd call them on the spot. I want to call and talk to them now and see how they're doing. And I missed this message, and I look back, and it's four weeks later. And so I send a message right away, and it says, I am so sorry I missed this message. Let's get together for coffee. Send.
And so this is exactly 4 weeks later, but I'm in Holland, and it's a funny story. My father was in Holland then too. We were actually there at the same time, and God planned it that way, that we had a little family reunion there as well. So I get home, looked at this message, and I'm like, yeah, you're not going to be having coffee with me anytime soon. I'm overseas. And so, it was God's timing and all of that, because we really hit it off pretty well together when we started messaging each other and we started video chatting. And God had a good plan of having us wait about 3 weeks before we met in person.
I'm already flipping out. First of all, what do you mean you're in Holland? I'm a farm boy from Ohio. I'm like, what are you doing in Holland? And she says, my family's there. My family's there. So we had 3 weeks to talk, send messages back and forth and stuff, and get to know each other and talk about cancer, talk about our faith, talk about our kids and things like that. And so she gets back to the States.
Yeah, so this is October 9th, and he decided he wanted to come pick me up. And so I fly through Philadelphia, and I'm sitting in the Philadelphia airport. Again, you will appreciate our God of details. And I'm like, that back of that head looks familiar, and this guy's walking, and it's a very busy airport, and there's this big U, and he's literally looking for a place to sit down. He comes back, and I'm like, it is him. It's my small group leader from church in Philadelphia airport. And Sean is about this tall and about this wide, quite a commanding presence. He's been in the military. He's a test helicopter pilot. And so I take my little selfie with him and send it. His wife is my very good friend. Send her the text. And so I was like, Sean, I gotta tell you something. Like, when we get to the baggage area, I'm meeting this guy for the very first time. I'm like, oh, this sounds weird. But I'm like, wait, you do know his cousin. Heather works for our church. So this might sound better than it is. So he comes with me to the baggage area.
I walk up and I'm meeting Hannah for the first time, and then there's this dude behind her, and he's huge, and he's a huge guy. He's ex-military and stuff. He's put together pretty well, and I'm like, she came with a bodyguard, I'm like, I can't even believe this. But I met Hannah and I met Sean, who him and his wife are great friends of ours, and that was our first meeting, was at the airport. Drove back to Hannah's house, sat in the driveway, talked for 2 hours, and I said, can I come back tomorrow and take you to breakfast?
So we finally had our coffee and didn't stop talking. And November 14th, so that was October 9th, November 14th we got engaged and got married January 1st. So between the two of us, we have 6 boys. And you know what you tell your 6
First of all, we have 6 boys. I have 2, she has 4. So we have 6. What are their ages right now?
18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23.
True
God of
story.
details.
True story. God of details. Our boys it reminds me of little ducks, in a row. And
Well, tall ducks in a row.
her very tall ducks. Yes. Yeah. Very tall ducks.
Those are still not tall.
Yes.
Very short.
Yeah. And as parents, what do we do? What do we tell our kids as parents? Slow it down. You got all kinds of time. Take your time. And here's me and Hannah, and it's just so right, and the chemistry and the conversation and our lives, and we're going 1,000 miles an hour. And within 3 months of actually meeting in person, we actually got married at Redemption Church in Arcadia, where we still go, and planned the wedding in 6 weeks when we said, let's plan this, and it's going to be small. And I told her, I said, this is ridiculous, because I got friends that plan weddings for 6 years. They're in it forever. I'm like, what are you doing? So I'm not kidding you. And you can go on our website and watch the wedding video. And I'm not kidding you.
It's 4 minutes long.
It's absolutely beautiful. It fell into place completely of God. And so we get married, we go off to Oceanside, California, we come back, we push our desks together, we look at each other, 2 stage 4 cancer people, what do you do with this, right?
So, I'd been watching Chuck. He's working landscaping stuff, and he's on the phone with people, coaching, and, I said to him, why don't you have a nonprofit? And he's like, I don't know how to do that. And so that's something we started really talking about, praying about, and he was a keynote speaker for American Cancer Society and the Phoenix chapter and a bunch of other things. And so we really started praying about, what are you calling us to? And so to know. It's just a lot of little series of things, but we decided let's start a nonprofit cancer organization so that we can at least coach people and, help them, and realizing it turned into a whole cancer ministry.
And I should add also, we're both already doing this. We're already doing it. I'm over here taking the calls and working with people and talking to people. And at that time, before everybody ran around with a mask on, I was in their living room, and I would even out of my pocket pay for a trip. I went to Traverse City, Michigan. And if you don't know where that's at the very top of Michigan. It's way up there, to spend 3 days with a family whose dad was diagnosed with cancer. So that's the kind of stuff that I was doing. We were already doing this, but we also said, and I guess I drug her to some of the events that I was speaking at, and we got home and she says, I love what we're doing. You can feel it in your heart. You speak and the people come up afterwards and hug and cry and laugh, and just, it's beautiful, right? And we get home and Hannah says, I love doing what we're doing. And we said, if we don't figure this out, we're gonna starve to death, because we were helping everybody else with their foundations. So we prayed over every single page of a nonprofit 501c3. And we were told by an attorney that it would probably take us about 6 months to actually get the paperwork back. And 4 weeks later, in our driveway, Hannah goes down and brings up the mail.
I'm like, here, you gotta open it.
She goes, you open this one, I don't want to open this one, because
and we were granted our
it's the
status.
IRS, and they said, congratulations, you're a 501c3. So that's what launched last year in February. So we're 1 year old right now, and we started really getting into how can we help more people going through this journey. And as you can imagine, it's our stories, and like, I wish this was in place. I wished somebody was there to do this for me, and like, we're gonna be that next room after someone's diagnosis and they're sent home because they know their chemo's starting in 3 or 4 weeks, and basically they sit there by themselves or with their family, and everybody's scared because everybody's confused and lost and in fear of the word cancer coming into their life. And we said, we are that next room. So after the diagnosis and the prognosis, the medical plan, we became the next room of, we call it positive spiritual mindset of cancer, helping them get through this journey that they're going through right now, helping them in any way we could, through coaching them. And so as we're starting to build this, something else happens in our lives.
So up to this point, I've been stable. I think most of you know that I've had breast cancer since 2016. I was diagnosed. And through a series of things that same year, prior to getting diagnosed, my husband left me, and so we ended up getting a divorce. I got diagnosed in August of 2016. My divorce went final in September. I had my surgery in October. I had to go back to work full-time in November. A year later, it progressed, so then I had to retire from my job, so I lost my career as a nurse. And a year later, one of my only really best friend took her own life, and that was the first time I had somebody that I knew really personally die, and it just, all of those things, it was like an excavating of my heart. I was realizing I was holding on to all of these things, like the security of my husband being my provider, having a job, me being my provider, being close to a friend and losing that, losing a job that I thought I was going to have forever, and a marriage that I thought I was going to have forever. And so it was all of these things that God started teaching me, that He was my first love, He was my source of all of it, and He was my provider, and He was my healer. And so that was the beginning of it, which is why I wrote my book called Faith Like Skin. And then, so when we met, I was stable. I was just on a medication that put my cancer to sleep. And about 4 months after we got married, all of a sudden I started having these symptoms. My heart was racing. I was starting to lose my breath. And then I started getting pain in my neck. And I thought I had like a disc going on, something. No thought of it being cancer. So I had a chiropractor come and do a little adjustment. Nothing helped. I kept having to pull my neck. It was like, that's the only way it felt better. So I finally decided to have a scan. And the scan showed that I had all this cancer in my chest, my armpits, my liver, and my lungs, and one on my pulmonary artery. It was a node sitting there. And then they sent me to a radiation doctor, and he's the one that noticed I had like a whole area in my neck that was just dark. Instead of the bone, it was just this dark structure. So he's like, we're gonna start doing radiation on you. We're starting chemo. We're gonna map you. We're gonna do a liver biopsy next week. The very next day I wake up and I'm in so much pain in my neck. And it sounds a little like him, where like it literally felt like there was a knife in my neck. And I started getting so much pain I was throwing up. And Chuck was like, I had to take you to the ER. Like, there is no end to this pain. And this is during COVID, right? So everything kind of shut down by us in March. This is about middle of May. So I go to the hospital, and he literally drops me off. Can't come inside with me. Put me in a wheelchair, wheel me in, bring me in a room.
They stopped me. They're like, that's
You
as far as
can't
you can
go.
go, mister. And I was, here's trying to figure out what's going on.
So he goes and parks in the parking lot to wait to see what's going on. I'm laying in the room, and then they take me and put me through the scanner and bring me back to the room, and then they walk in and they're like, so just so you know, you have a fracture in your neck. And I'm thinking, who walks around with a broken back, right? So I'm in so much pain, and they said, we're gonna have to move you to another hospital so that you can have your surgery, because we need to fuse your neck. So they actually went,
No,
knocked on his
it was
window.
very interesting what just happens. I hear a knocking on my window. I'm not going to drive home because I don't know what's happening with her yet. So I'm sitting there waiting, and I get a knock on my window about 3 hours later, and the nurse says, hey, listen, she's going to be transferred to another hospital for a surgery that she needs. They also just realized how serious this just got when they seen how her neck was broke and the cancer and everything. And they said, we're going to take you inside the hospital to her room, and you can hang out with her for a little bit, before they take her over to the other hospital, because they knew that was really a little window that I would get to actually sit there and hold her hand. So I go in, and we sit there for about an hour, talking a little bit, and just holding her hand. And then the ambulance people come in, and they get her on the gurney, and I go out, and last thing I see, they're driving off with Hannah in the back of there to the next hospital, which I can't get in either. So then I have to go home.
Yeah. So that was probably one of the hardest things I've had to do, because I was all alone trying to advocate for myself, first of all, in pain. And I have to say, it's also one of the sweetest moments I've had in my life, laying in a neuro ICU for a day before my surgery, flat on my back in a neck brace, and the only thing I had with me is my cell phone. And on my cell phone is my worship playlist. And the only thing I could do, I couldn't even really talk to people, was lay there and listen to worship music and lay there and worship. And I just felt the palpable presence of God with me. And I remember, like, one of the anesthesiologists came in to, do the assessment before the surgery, and I was like, can I pray for you? So I ended up praying for him and the surgeon before surgery. And it's kind of neat. And so then they ended up cutting off the cerebral artery on for one surgery. And the next surgery, they fused my C5 through C7, putting rods in. So that was Tuesday. I wake up Wednesday morning, doctor comes in, and I'm like, so when can I go home? And so they let me go home that day right out of the ICU.
She had
Power
major
of God.
surgery. Okay, they put her in the ICU. Anytime I know of anybody, they go to the ICU, they're 3 or 4 days there, then they downgrade them to the next room, and they're there for 3, 4, 5 days, and then maybe they can go home. She has surgery, the next day she's in ICU, I get a phone call, and she says, come and get me, and I'm like, what?
Well, he's a way better nurse. So it was the next few months were really hard. I had to learn how to live with a thing around my neck. Every bump hurt, walking, driving. And I started having swallowing problems. So the surgery goes to the front of your neck. And between the surgery and the scar tissue, and then they started radiation on that node on my chest, all of a sudden I couldn't even swallow my own spit. And I'd been going to the ER 3 times, and they couldn't figure it out. And finally, the 3rd time, they admitted me and figured out that I had all this ulcerations in my esophagus. And so they had to put a feeding tube in to keep me alive.
The radiation burnt, she couldn't swallow anymore. They put a feeding tube in
Poke it right through.
to keep her alive. They got to get some nutrition in her body. 6 or 7 days went by, she didn't eat. And so now she's got a feeding tube stuck into her belly that she can pour milkshakes and juices and waters and stuff into to keep her alive, right?
So I lost about 26 pounds in 5 weeks, which I don't recommend doing it that way. So yeah, so it was 6, 7 weeks that I had this. I called it 2B, so he had a name. And so I was unable to eat, and then as I told you, I was losing my voice. I was unable to speak, and those are all like the little things I really enjoy to do. I love to sing. I love food. If you know me at all, I am a foodie, and it was just another. For me, I see it as God teaching me to let go of the idols and the things of this world that I just kept holding on to, and being able to learn how to surrender every single day, all of these parts that I was still holding on to. And, I've come to this point now where I feel free, because I feel I have joy, and it's not about the food I'm eating or the pain I'm having or not having. It's the joy is in Him.
Or the guy that's making a mess in your house that's not cleaning up after himself.
Well, that's true. No. So that has been like the most beautiful part of the suffering is learning those lessons.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed also was, we started the foundation, which the foundation we did little live, we call them coffee chats on Friday morning, and the coffee chats were like 200, 300, 400, 500 people, and then all of a sudden coronavirus starts, and so you get this captive audience, and then she starts going through this journey, and the captive audience starts really honing in on Hannah and her journey, and this little coffee chat that we do goes to 2,000 people, 8,000 people, 12,000 people are watching this coffee chat about Hannah and I's life, her journey with cancer, and our faith, and we're blown away. We're blown away, and we chatted about this in the morning, and we really felt God put us here, and He would not waste our pain. So many people were being affected watching Hannah through this journey, which still continues. She just finished 9 months of chemo 2 weeks ago and had a break. That's why we were able to do this. And then tomorrow, Wednesday she starts on month 10 of chemo. So she's not done yet. And they do a scan. They do a scan every three months, and the scan tells us where things are at. And if there's traces of chemo or cancer in her body, you keep going, right? But I will say that a couple months ago, after one of the scans, what happened with the cancer in your body?
Well, all of that was gone, but then there were 3 little active lesions. And we also had to move. So our house that we were renting, they decided to flip it. So we found a beautiful new spot, another beautiful God story. We could talk all day, for real. And the day after we moved, I wake up and I'm like, Chuck, in the middle of the night, I gotta go to the bathroom. I literally cannot walk. There's something wrong. So he picks me up and I shuffle to the bathroom. And on the way back, I'm like, I can't lay back on the bed. Just put me on the couch, firmer. Let me try to sleep there. So he gets me comfortable. Can't sleep. He finally comes back around 5 o'clock in the morning, and I try to sit up, and I literally have no ability to hold my weight up. I was in agony.
I can't sit up. I can't sit up.
It's the weirdest feeling.
I call 911, and what happens for the second time in my life, the fire department comes rolling in. They get her. They use this. They can't get the gurney in the front door because there's an arch outside. And so they come in with this bag with handles that looks like something from, what do you call it?
I call it the IKEA bag. Do you guys have IKEA here? They have those handles.
They have the handles on them. So they lay this thing down. They roll her back, lay it down, roll her onto it. They pull it around her,
like
and a bunch of these big
carrying.
firefighters pick it up. And I hear every movement. Oh, the pain that was going on. And I start having flashbacks of 5 years ago with all the fire department picking Chuck up and getting him out to the gurney, and the way it felt. It was so unbelievable. And they drive her off to the hospital.
So I get there about 7:30 in the morning, and they don't give me any pain meds because they still have to access my port and do the scan. So they take me to the scan, and I'm literally crying from the pain. And bring me back to the room, and they come in, and they're like, "We gotta tell you, you have fractured vertebrae, or like my sacrum. So you have a
Another
fractured
fracture.
back." And I'm like, who walks around with a broken back? Because it hadn't happened the day before. Oh, so we're 2 peas in a pod. So I find out that I have this fracture and the pain won't go away. They're giving me all the kinds of narcotics, and they're so strong and nothing's working. And about 8 o'clock at night, I finally fall asleep because I asked them, please stop giving me narcotics. and just vomiting from them. I tried talking to him on the phone, and I was so nauseous I couldn't even eat to him. And so I was like, just let's try to do like a muscle relaxer. And so I finally fell asleep from exhaustion and woke up a few hours later, and all of a sudden I was like, most of the pain's gone. Like it was 99%. I was in agony. It hit, I would say a 12 on a scale of 1 to 10, and I'm pretty tough. And I was back down to like a 2. And I was amazed to wake up like that.
She could sit up. She could go to the bathroom. The phone call, I said, what do you mean? Because that day, the doctors and nurses that called me said, we are planning some kind of a in-home care. And I'm thinking, what just happened to our lives from this fracture to now she has to have in-home care to get her to the bathroom and to get her to bed and things like that. I was freaking out, and all of a sudden she's like, I walked to the bathroom. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Healer God. So during that day, he posts on Facebook and all over the place, this army of prayer warriors starts praying. And you know, God hears our prayers. And so, and even very specifically, I don't know if I've told you this, my sister Tamara was like, I was very specifically praying for you exactly at that time, which I love. I love hearing that. And even overnight, the nurse shift changed, so I had a new nurse. And she walks in, she's like, the last nurse says, you are just such a positive person. She's like, I want to know why. Like, you know, these are her words. And I was like, first of all, I feel like I was crying and throwing up that whole shift, so I don't know what he saw. But I got to give her my testimony at 2:30 in the morning, which is amazing. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is why I'm in the hospital. So I, wake up the next morning. I actually put my makeup on. I'm able to walk to the bathroom. And my 2 doctors I had seen the day before walk in, and they literally did a double take. They're like, wait a minute, like you're sitting in bed. What happened? And I was like, I got a lot of people praying for me.
Absolutely. So
I went home that day at 12:30.
She called me and I picked her up and she came home. And the last 2 months have been a little gingery, You got a broken bone. We know the human body's got to heal. So, there was probably 3 or 4 weeks where she didn't do a lot. And then all of a sudden I noticed, she's like, I think I'm going to cook dinner tonight, or I think I'm going to do this. And I'm like, are you sure? And I still have rules. Don't bend over and pick up anything. Don't. If I see her, I get on her and stuff, but she's tough and she keeps trying to do these things. But she's gradually getting better. But like I said, she has starts the 10th month of chemo this coming week in 2 days. The thing about our stories and what God orchestrated in our lives is the first thing you have to know is the change that I went through my journey. Okay, the change that who I used to be then and who I am now. And it's a very spiritual talk. It's a chat about Chuck and a hard-headed farm boy that thought he had things figured out and kept bumping my head against the wall my entire life. And even when I had a somewhat successful landscaping business in Arizona, and I was told by just people around you and stuff, hey, when you've got trucks and a nice house and all these things, you're gonna have the best life. And I got to where I had a nice house with a swimming pool and 3 trucks and all my equipment and motorcycles in the garage for me and the kids and stuff, and I was still really lost. And what I realized, it wasn't of material things and of this world. My loss was a spiritual loss. I didn't know what a personal relationship with Jesus was. And when I seen this human body that was almost melted down and melting away, when I seen this human body getting better, I said, God, I know back when Jesus walked on the earth that it took a miracle for humans in these brains to go, this is real. This is real. Well, a modern day miracle was what got my attention. And I said, if you can do this, you've got my attention. I surrender my life to you completely, and I will let you orchestrate my life 100%. 100%. Not knowing what's going to happen. And everybody knows, just because you're a Christian don't mean life's going to be easy. But it's so blessed. It's so blessed. So part of this huge blessing for this old farm boy from Ohio was meeting Hannah. I was, in my 50s. I said, I really would like to have somebody in my life to make memories with. But if your plan is for me to grow by myself, that's okay then. And then Hannah walks into my life, and I'm just completely blown away. But we tell our story because it's happening right now, and it's happening to us. And it is a little different than probably something, that you may never hear something like this again.
So I think the beautiful part of it is how God has put us together, divinely paired us to now share our beautiful story with other people and offer them hope, true hope, So all these people are coming to us that have cancer, and even not, and to share, yes, there's these, we do a lot of physical things to help them nurture and take care of the body that God's given us, but like the true hope, of knowing God and who He is, and that is where your freedom is, that if you're in cancer or any hard thing, you know that peace of God, you're in a win-win situation. You die, you're with Him, and you live, you get to be with Him. So that is just something that has been so awesome. Like the other day I got a message from somebody, and she's deathly afraid of dying, literally. She's scared. And she's like, all I need is a little bit of hope. And I was like, well, that is to the right person, because I'm like, I can help you walk alongside and show you how, and I'm doing it because God's enabling me to do it. And so it's been a really neat thing to just get to link arms with believers that are struggling with the goodness of God and pointing non-believers to Him. So it's not a platform I ever wanted to be on, but God
Hardest
put me
thing I've
here.
ever done.
Yeah, and then put us together on it, and so it's just been this beautiful journey to get to be on, and I would do it all over again, even though it's painful and hard.
Absolutely. So we share the story for the first reason is just to improve your faith. Just hear the modern day miracles and what's happening right now, and it's beautiful to us. It's challenging. It's not an easy day. But if the word cancer comes up in your life, you, a loved one, a neighbor, remember Living Hope Cancer Foundation, because we want to talk to them. We want to talk to them and coach them through this. We want to be there for them, because no one should go through this alone. And most time, even if they're not going through it alone, they're still confused, like, what do you do? And we want to be two people that are in this cancer world that can give them some ideas, some hope, some navigation, some hugs, laugh with them, cry with them, whatever we need to do. And also, since we started the nonprofit, we're still trying to figure that out. We started something that we just love. This is our passion. This is where we should be. This is how we're going to help people. We didn't know it was going to start spreading around the country, and eventually now a little bit around the world. We're getting emails from all over the place because they're finding our stuff on social media. And so now business people have come to us and said, you've got to get this organized, because you and Hannah cannot just sit there and coach these people on the phone by yourself. And so we have some people in our corner that God sent our way. We didn't go looking for a business consultant or a marketing company. People called out of the blue and said, we're watching what you're doing and we want to help you. We want to be a part of this. So it is growing. Some really neat things are happening with that. And so if you know somebody that maybe owns a business that says we're looking for a really good 501c3 nonprofit, because if they donate, it's a tax write-off. So a lot of businesses look for things like this. Let them know who we are. Let them know who we are. We're still a little baby right now, and we're hoping that we can be a household word, eventually in the future, so that when the word cancer comes up, we can actually be in that person's life.
Yeah, and if you feel called in any way to monthly support us, even if it's $5, we could too, because we are ministry.
Everything counts.
And we do have our website we're building and constantly changing. We have a really neat video source on there. We call it the Cancer Roadmap Project. That's a helpful way. It's kind of like us coaching, but just in little 2 to 3 minute videos, or 40 video series.
40 videos.
There's a lot of things, resources that we're developing
Really
as
neat.
we go.
It's called the Cancer Roadmap Project. 40 videos, 2 to 3 minutes, and anybody can watch. And then I found out I've got people that don't have cancer that are watching it. They're like, we love following you guys. We love the inspiration. So it's out there for everybody. We're both published authors now, which is just ridiculous for me, being an old farm boy. Like, published author and farm boy don't go in the same sentence, but I am. So we brought some of our books. If you guys haven't read it, and if you want a copy, get a signed copy,
And we
let
have
us know.
masks if you wear them.
Yeah.
So
Thank you so much for coming out
for
to
letting
see
us
us.
share. If you have any questions,
Yeah.
we answer those too.
Yeah.